Hi, Patty. Oh,
Hi.
hi.
Hi. Hang on just a second. Lizzie, close the door for the laundry room. Okay. Hi.
Hi. I'm doing the most here. We're going to live stream and Zoom. Look at all the beautiful people who live at your house.
Oh, my daughter.
So, how are you? Oh my goodness, I feel like I missed you.
Good. I know I haven't seen you in a while. You've been busy, cranking, working hard.
I know, you too. You too. So it's funny because I was like literally since I reached out to you to have this conversation, I feel like it's been nonstop. Like every conversation I've had thereafter and before, which was leading to creating this conversation, has been about like, well, I don't know what I should do. Like it's just a big bubble of uncertainty. So we'll give people a couple minutes here to join on. And I see our friend Suzette. Hi to Suzette. And we got Calvin. Hi to Calvin. Happy belated Father's Day. Oh, where are you? I want to be where you are. This is beautiful.
CC.
Hi,
Calvin.
Calvin. How are you?
Hey, Patty, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, I'm hanging in there.
Hi guys.
Hey, Georgie. How are you?
Yeah, how about you guys?
Good. So happy first day of summer, right? Or second day of summer. Things to be excited about. So since we have some really great resources on, I'm just going to go ahead and ask Georgie and Calvin, what questions have you guys been getting about the impact of the interest rates for buyers and for homeowners and sellers as well?
So,
Go ahead, Georgie.
yeah, sellers are thinking it's not a good time to sell.
Mhm.
And buyers are thinking that they need to wait until prices reduce a bit more to purchase. That's what I'm getting.
That's
Yeah. So what'd you say, CC? Sorry.
I said that's a good summary, right? Like the two bullet points for both sides.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate for me as well. I was talking to one of my buyers this morning, and they're not so much interested in the interest rate because they are a savvy buyer and have bought before, so they know that they're going to be able to refinance relatively soon. They're more concerned about the price point, and they want to get a home. They're quoted 300 to 500K. They want to save on the price of the home before they get into the market, so they're looking more towards the end of the year for one specifically.
Okay, so people that are kind of like playing the game as far as what their entry price point is because they know they can refinance later.
Yeah, and then I have a cash buyer who's pretty hot right now, but buyers can be picky right now. Inventory is increasing, and she just wants to make sure she's buying the correct home because she's buying it for somebody else. So she wanted to make sure it's the right space for them. So I think there's a couple different factors going on, which people taking pause and for different reasons.
Yeah, that's a great one. And I know I just came from working with someone who is a first-time home buyer. And, it was funny because we just went to go see some properties here in the East Bay. And this morning I talked to her and she was like, I really think I'm going to keep renting for a while. And then after we saw two properties that she really liked and locations that she liked that were possibly more in her budget than she thought, she was like, I have to buy. That's so weird. This morning for breakfast, I was like, man, I'm going to be renting forever. And then by the end of the afternoon, she's really like, okay, maybe this is the better spent of my money because I'm just throwing away my rent money. So it was, literally, it's not even been a full day yet. So we'll see where her head's at by the end of the evening.
Right.
Yeah, that's a really cool testimony because I think that's a very common experience for buyers. I always say that one of the most important benefits of home ownership is the process that people go through to become homeowners, and the belief that takes place inside their hearts and minds that they can do it and that they become that. It's a really big deal to buy a house. It's not like you're buying a pack of gum, right? So, I mean, for someone to be sitting and renting thinking, I want to be a homeowner, I want to be a homeowner, it's just like any other goal we set for ourselves. Every negative thought that you can possibly have creeps in to make you feel like this is not possible for you. And then it's our job to keep them excited and motivated about, motivated to stay in the game. And then they see that one opportunity. I think what Calvin said is spot on about inventory rising, buyers being more picky. The last 3 contracts that I have seller credits, 7,700, 5,000, and one for $42,000. Seller credits, I haven't heard the phrase seller credit in 7 years, okay? So this is an excellent time to negotiate a great deal. There's some cool statistics I prepared for you today to talk to you guys about where we're headed. So as many of you know, every time we've talked about buying down interest rates or locking interest rates, I've adamantly been against that with lock and shop because I don't want people to waste money. And when you think about the dollar amount that someone spends up front to either lock a rate early or to buy down an interest rate, and you do the math on the savings, it would cost them a fraction of that to refinance within the next 12 to 18 months when rates go down. Let me tell you where we're headed in terms of the economy for that conversation, okay? I have these notes, pardon me for looking down because I wrote them down. So the idea here is that inflation, the numbers for inflation are really high, right? So we have an 8-point-something% inflation rate, and the Fed says we're going to raise interest rates so that we can cut this inflation number back down. So right now you have, if the Fed wants to go from where we're at right now up to 3%, I believe we're at 1.75%, and they want to go up to 3%. What happens is we go into a recession and you have interest rates dropping. You have interest rates dropping because the demand is going to severely go down, and then you have inventory going up, and then you have a situation where interest rates are rising. So when the Fed says we're raising interest rate, it's actually good for the mortgage rates that people are getting. It's a good sign. It means that they want to get the inflation numbers back in order so that it makes sense to lower the interest rates. So keep that in mind, that when your buyers are talking to you right now and they're worried about the interest rate and they're thinking about waiting or buying it down or locking early, that the opportunity, like Calvin said, to refinance in the very near future is super real. They're going to be, I would say that anyone who's getting an interest rate in the mid 5 range or the 6% range right now is going to be able to refinance within 2 years down into the 4% range. People are going to refinance when they can lower the rate by just 1 percentage point. And even today, we're locking in as low as 4.75% on an ARM. Another really cool statistic that I picked up for you guys today is that back in 2007 and 8, a major concern that you guys had mentioned, buyers don't want to buy, sellers don't want to sell. Do you know that in 2010, the average credit score for a home buyer was 699. Today, in 2022, the average credit score for home buyers is 751. That's a big number. That's a big jump. 751 credit score is an excellent credit score. And what that means is that it indicates that people who are managing debt can manage the debt that they have, right? So no matter what anyone says, no matter what the hype is about a potential crash in real estate, just remember that people have more equity today than they did 12 years ago. Their credit ratings are higher. Nobody is going to walk away from a house that they could benefit from selling for 10, 15, 20, or maybe 250 or 350 or $800,000. Nobody is walking away from that, even if they have a financial hardship. They're not throwing away that money. Their credit scores are better. They have tons of equity. And on top of that, even though prices are a lot higher, interest rates are relatively normal. It's a normalizing market. We want it to normalize. The key thing to emphasize is that we are not seeing prices drop. We're seeing appreciation normalize. So the price of your home appreciated 20% over the last 3 to 4 years. That's not normal. So the prices are not going down. The rate of appreciation is changing. It's normalizing back down to maybe 5 to 8%, which is normal in California. Yes, sir, Mr. Calvin, sir.
Question. The
Yeah.
clients, the people on the Discord are going to say, well, I actually have seen prices reduced in the market here recently. So what do you mean that prices aren't going down?
Yeah, what you're seeing is a price reduction. And when someone makes that presents that question to me, my answer to that is this. Just like back when people were offering significantly above the ask price, I would always have to clarify the difference between a list price, the market value, and the appraised value. There's a very clear distinction between those three things. So if I list a property at a certain number, I'm hoping to attract buyers. That number, the list price, does not give you an indication of what the property value is, what the market value is, or what the appraised value will be. That is always going to be based on the average sales within a 1 mile radius, the most recent average sales within a 1 mile radius that are similar to that property. So Mr. or Mrs. Buyer, let me help you remember that. So when the value of anything is what someone is willing to pay for it. So someone was coming into that willing to pay above market value for the property or above appraised value for the property. They were willing to pay a premium to beat out the competition. Now you do not have 75% of that competition no longer exists in the market. So guess what? You don't have to cut the check for the premium anymore. You're still paying market value for the property. So the value of the property hasn't changed. It's the appreciation that was caused by the competition in the marketplace because there were 75% more buyers in the game.
That's what I keep trying to tell them.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. That's an important factor. It's how we word it. They don't understand the distinction between a list price, the market value, and an appraised value. So those are really key, distinctions. And, when someone says that and you have an aha moment, imagine how the buyer feels. Then they feel so much more confident placing the offers. Now you don't have to compete. You're not getting a discount on the property. You're just not paying the premium.
So what does that mean for people that are looking to refi within this time period? So let's say someone did or did not get an opportunity to refi on anything that they had in the last year or two, whether it's a good time to take money out of their house or a good time to leave their money in their house with all of this fluctuation in stocks and inflation. What would be your 2 cents there?
Well, people are going to refi in a higher interest rate environment simply because they have to. No one's going to do it unless they have to. Mm-hmm. So you have a pinch in the economy and your income went down or you accumulated debt. You were hoping you were going to do more sales. You couldn't do it. So now you're going to tap into your equity to pay off some bills. So let's say that as a result of your interest rate increase, your mortgage payment is now up by $500. But by paying off your debt, you now save $1,250 a month. People are way more, people think way more in terms of managing their monthly household budget than they will about the interest rate in times like this. Like Calvin said, my buyer was savvy and they didn't care about the interest rate because they're an experienced buyer and they know that they can refinance down the line. In times like this, if you had a 2.875 interest rate or a 3.25% interest rate, and I told you that today you can get a cash out loan at 5.75%. The only reason you're doing it is because you have to. So there has to be a benefit. For all lenders, there's something called a net tangible benefit. It's an actual form that we have to fill out to prove that there is a tangible benefit to the customer for refinancing, whether it's getting rid of mortgage insurance, lowering the monthly payment, or significantly paying off debt, or maybe they're doing some home improvements that would increase their value. If there isn't a net tangible benefit to the refinance, they're not going to do it. So people are only refinancing in a higher interest rate environment when they need to. That's why in our industry, they'll call it a refi boom. As long as interest rates were down in those 2 years, most of the numbers you see people producing was strictly refinance business because they were refinancing every single person in their database. So let's say that in 2 years, in 2024, which is estimated that interest rates would go down again. At that time, you're going to see everyone who purchased this year in 2022 rushing to refinance because they're going to be able to save a percentage or half a point on their loan. In your marketplace, with the average sales price being high and the loan amounts being in the millions, on average, you're going to have people that are significantly benefiting from a refinance when the rate drops by even 50 basis points, half a point. So people will be motivated to refinance in the next couple of years based on for the incentive of lowering their rate. Anyone who's refinancing now, they might be going through a marital divorce type of situation where they have to buy out the partner, or they're in an adjustable rate mortgage, and the fluctuating payments is impacting them, and they don't want that. So they're trying to get it fixed, even though the payment's going to be higher, or they need the cash out to pay off debt, or for other reasons. I'm going to give you another really cool statistic that I wrote down. So in 2007, okay, in 2007, 13 million, there were 13 million loans that had adjustable interest rates. In 2022, there's only 2.5 million. That's a big difference. In 2007, when the great crash happened that led to a serious economic downturn, there were 10 million adjustable rate mortgages that reset. 10 million. In 2022, in this year, where interest rates are higher, only 1.4 million adjustable rate mortgages are resetting, which is another reason why you will not see a severe financial hardship that leads to more homes on the market because of, foreclosure. Okay. So what does that mean? In the last few years, when I've talked to people about an adjustable rate mortgage, we will tell them you're not in position to take an adjustable rate mortgage unless you can afford the payment if it goes up by 2%. We always have that conversation. And what happens is at the end of the 5, 7, or 10-year term, the payment is now based on the new balance. So it actually recasts based on the current, whatever the interest rate adjusts, and it also recasts based on the current balance. So again, let's say that those 1.4 million loans reset in 2022 and they had a 2% interest rate, and their interest rate goes up. It has a maximum of 2% a year. So that rate goes from 2.875 to 4.875. It's still technically lower than the current market rate. And that customer their payment is being readjusted to the new balance. They can afford it. It's not going to put them in a financial hardship. They can afford it. They were just taking advantage of the time period that they had at an extremely lower interest rate to pay off more of their principal. So furthermore, indicating that we don't have to worry about the same elements that took place in 2007 that led to such a severe increase in inventory that drove the prices down, because people's adjustable rate mortgages reset and they could no longer afford their payments, and then they had to get rid of the homes. And mind you, they walked away because not only could they no longer afford the payment, but they had no skin in the game. They had bought 5 properties with no money down. So it's a whole different ballgame. And we have to constantly remind people of that, because I'm seeing a lot of content on social media that is, in my opinion, fear mongering about a crash in real estate, which I just don't see the same elements, the same variables of that equation here today.
That's a great comment, because I feel like, one of the reasons and one of the catalysts for having this conversation was all of these like headlines that made people nervous, because everyone said they want to wait, but they're not sure why. So if you're in that category and you're speaking to people who were looking, they were actively house hunting maybe a month ago, 2 months ago, maybe earlier this year, but they've kind of stepped back because of uncertainty, what would you say in that regard?
The one thing that I always say, which is focus back on the payment. Just off the top of my head from one chart I was working on today, if someone was approved 6 months ago for a $700,000 home, their payment was around $2,800. Today, to keep a payment of $2,800, they'd have to buy a house for $597,000 instead. That's a 20% decline in the purchase price to maintain the same affordability that they had. So apply that to your marketplace. How much are you seeing this technical price reduction? So if the property, I think you guys would agree that if a property was listed for, let's say, 1.5 million, 6 months ago, that property could sell for at least 1.8 or 1.9. 8 months ago, 6 months, right? That same property is selling for 1.65 right now.
Mhm.
So the difference is that if they were approved for that price and they were shopping for the 1.8, they can technically get that 1.8 or $1.9 million home for 1.5 or 1.7 million now.
Mm.
So the difference in the payment means now I'm still paying the same payment I was going to pay at 1.9 on a $1.6 million home because of the interest rate, but I can still afford to do it. And I'm still going to see at least a minimum of an 8% increase year over year in my real estate purchase, which is much more stable than anything else that you can invest your money in right now. And we all know that real estate is an incredible hedge against inflation. Again, well, oh, it's only 8%. Well, my friend just made this much. Remember, ma'am or sir, in the last 10 years, in the last 4 or 5 years, you saw a 20% rate of return on your real estate. That was unrealistic. If we continued at that capacity, none of us on this call would be able to afford a home. So that in itself had to correct itself. You had prices skyrocketing because you had way too low of an inventory for the amount of buyers that you have in the market. There's nothing we can ever do to change the fundamental laws of supply and demand. We still have a supply issue. So demand has decreased by 75 to 80%, and we still don't have enough homes on the market for the amount of buyers that we have today. So as that inventory increases, essentially what we're doing is we're bringing the demand back down to match the supply. It's just balancing out to a normal market where in real estate, you'll still have the benefit of gains of 5 to 8% year after year. And many would argue in California, that number is higher.
Definitely. So in that conversation, right, because we're talking about people who just reading the headlines and getting nervous. Well, when we're saying that there's an increase in supply versus the decrease in demand, would you say it's dramatic as far as the demand being more dramatic and the increase being incrementally tiny?
Yeah, I would, that's such a great that's such a great observation, because when people talk about mortgage demand decreasing, they also need to highlight in big, bold letters what the demand and applications represented: a lot of refinances, not just purchase business. So I would say that already this month, I've had $30 million worth of applications for mortgages. I'm just one person. These are all for purchase loans. So I don't think that I think that there is a slowdown. I think we are seeing at least a 40% decrease in the demand right now, because there is a knee-jerk reaction to what's happening to interest rates, and rightfully so. There are not a lot of people that can afford an extra $500 a month, because on average, Americans are spending $460 more per month on groceries right now and gas. So American households on average across the nation, so in California that number is higher, are spending an extra $460 a month. So if I'm spending an extra $500 a month just to live, just to eat, and just to get to work, I cannot afford to spend an extra $1,500 a month on my mortgage. So right now I don't have a choice but to sit this one out. There are a lot of people that don't have to sit it out, but there are a lot of people that do. So yes, demand for mortgages are definitely going down, and that is the intention of the feds. That was the intention of raising interest rates and tightening the money supply, so that there would be less demand, so that the demand can balance out with the supply. Now, what we look at for data of supply, by the way, CC, is approximately 2 months behind schedule. So I think we're going to see what's happening today in the reports that come out in August. So we'll see how the numbers pan out. I think what you guys experience in your marketplace is actually more significant than what we read on the news, okay? And what I mean by that is you have to control whatever's happening in your own environment. Like if you focus on your business plan and you're making the same amount of calls, well, you might need to make twice the amount of calls to get the same results that you were getting 8 months ago in terms of traffic in your business. But at the same time, the business is still there. There are people that want to buy homes. I just talked to someone who moved from Minnesota to California. In the last 6 months, my conversations were more about people leaving California. And there are still people that are moving to California for tech jobs. There are still people that need to upgrade their homes. There are still people that need to downsize their homes and sell. So there's always going to be a strong amount of people that want to buy and sell no matter what the market conditions are. But for a lot of people, that demand is diminishing because they can't afford that extra monthly payment, the amount that's how their monthly payment has been impacted by the interest rate increasing.
Got it. Well, that makes sense. I had a phone call today from someone coming from the East Coast who's going to be relocating to the Bay Area, right? And just the same conversation. So this just happened in the news last week. So can you tell us from last week, from when this, well, there was the precursor to when this announcement was going to be made, and then the announcement was made, and now it's been 7 days of reactions and impact. Can you tell us what that's looked like in the last, like since that day happened, since the announcement came out versus the impact now, and what you might think will happen between now and the next time?
Sure. Yeah. So going back to the Federal Reserve's, when they did their, what do you call it? Press conference. Okay. So they had a press conference following it. It was the Friday before the press conference, which was on Wednesday. The Friday before that, the CPI report came out. Okay. The CPI report indicated that inflation had gone up by another percent. So this sent the markets into a frenzy because when the Federal Reserve had their press conference prior to that, they said that they were only raising the rates by 50 points and they were not going to increase by the other 75 basis points. They didn't think it was necessary, that the 50 basis points was going to do the trick and help, reduce the demand and help to reduce the inflation numbers. Well, they were wrong. So as a result of them being wrong, the markets went into a frenzy, and it just happened to be on a Friday. And if you just for scale, between that Friday and Monday, the market, the mortgage-backed securities went down by 253 points. That would mean that interest rates, the cost of interest rates were impacted by 253 points because they were like, oh my God, this inflation is out of control. Inflation is essentially the price of goods and services going up because there's not enough to go around for the amount of people that want them. So I was telling one of my best friends that, she's a nurse practitioner and she does like Botox and fillers and whatnot. And I told her, if you were the only person in Walnut Creek that sold Botox, you'd be able to charge $100 a unit instead of $10 a unit. That was how I was trying to make her understand why she couldn't win a bid that was 500,000 above asking during that time. So you have not enough to go around, tons of people that want it. That's what drives the prices up. So the Fed had no choice. If they came on Wednesday and they said, we're not going to raise the rates, the entire world would have went absolutely crazy. So they said, we're going to raise the interest rates by 75 points. We're going to continue to raise the interest rates. And on top of that, our goal, we are aggressively working on getting the inflation numbers back down to 2%. So their job is to reduce the inflation by about 6%. Now, the general consensus is that it's difficult to do during the summer months because people are spending money. Kids are out of school, people are going on vacation, people are buying goods, buying things. 70% of the economy is made up of consumer spending. So as long as people are spending money, that number is not necessarily going to go down. So they had to do something. They had to take action. So they've raised the interest rates by 75 points, and they said, we're going to continue to do it. The immediate reaction that I think is confusing or misunderstood by many people is that mortgage rates went down when they made that announcement. Because as soon as you have, in the market where mortgage-backed securities are being bought and sold, investors, investment banks need to know that this is going to be a solid investment. What does that mean? So as a bank, when a bank makes a bunch of loans, they package them up, they sell them to an investor, and then the investor divides the shares or the ownership of that amongst people who are buying mortgage-backed securities. So when these mortgage-backed securities are being bought and sold, they're only worthwhile if they perform. So for example, if you buy stock in Tesla and everyone starts selling their Teslas and no one wants to drive a Tesla anymore because Elon Musk is on the news smoking weed, the value of your stock goes down because no one wants to buy them anymore. So in mortgages with mortgage-backed securities, if the buyers do not perform, meaning that they are not making the payments, then the asset is not performing and nobody wants to buy them. So the fear becomes that with rates going up or loans adjusting or people not being able to buy them, this is not going to be a performing asset. Why would I buy this dying stock? So that's what happens to try to paint a picture. And that's when the price goes up and down. So when inflation goes through the roof and rates are going up and everything's going crazy, the reason why you see the impact on the interest rates is because when the bond prices go down, the interest rates go up. So when the Fed comes and says, hey, we've got a plan, we've got this under control, we're doing well, the mortgage-backed securities perform better, the price goes up, and then the interest rates go down. So interest rates have actually decreased since the announcement, and the market has been improving. It has been improving this week. Overall, there's been an improvement to pricing. I actually delayed a closing by 24 hours because I waited until today to lock the loan, because I'm like, no, they're going to save $2,000. I want them to save $2,000. The seller will live if we close a day late. So that's how we operate. So we just, that's kind of the answer to your question. Sorry if that was too long.
No, please. Like, the conversation all week for every person that I've talked to has been like big old question mark, like cartoons, like, oh, the Fed rate went up. I'm like, okay. They're like, I'm going to wait. I'm like, for what? Like, I'm not sure. So whatever paints that picture so that everyone can have a clear understanding, by all means. I'm also wanting to just check in with everyone who's online. If you guys just want to drop in the chat, if you have a question, but you're not sure how or when to ask, please feel free. Patty is a wonderful resource. She is incredibly knowledgeable, and this is her jam. Like, this is her world of expertise. For those of you who don't know, since we're like in the middle, Patty, do you want to tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. I've been a mortgage banker for 20 years. It's the only thing I've ever done as an adult. I'm really, really proud because my parents are immigrants and I come from absolutely nothing. So I'm really proud to share with you guys that I was named one of the top 100 females in the industry in I'm one of I was ranked 99, and that's based on production. It's not like me being a nice person, so it's a big accomplishment. I'm excited about that. The numbers really truly just reflect my level of experience, which I'm also equally proud of. There's really no scenario I haven't seen, and I think nothing matters more than experience during times like this, where we have nothing but volatility, lots of uncertainty, and it really helps that I've been through this before twice in our industry, adding a pandemic to that. So, that's it. I love what I do. This is the only thing I've ever done as an adult, and I love it.
We love that you love it, and it shows. So on to our next questions that we had more frequently, as far as like buyers waiting, what they're waiting for is what are you hearing people are waiting for if they're not sure about pulling money out of stocks, or if they're not sure about pulling money for their down payment? Like, people are hesitant to move money around right now if it is that they are in the need of buying a home.
Well, yeah, I mean, if someone wants to wait, the reason why they want to wait changes per person. So let's say that I want to wait because I have a fixed income, and with my fixed income right now, with the interest rates being as high as they are, practically at 6% on a 30-year fix, I'm unable to afford this change in payment. So I have to wait until I get my raise. I have to wait until I get my bonus. I have to wait until rates go down. I have to wait until the prices drop a little bit more. So if that's their concern, your primary goal is going to be to find a property that has that fits their criteria, that has very little traffic, right? Because you're going to be able to go in there and say, listen, Mr. or Mrs. Buyer, I've been able to negotiate this purchase price for you under what you were expecting, along with a credit from the seller towards your closing costs, which you're going to see a lot more of. And when you do that, then it might change their perspective. Also, if someone is hesitating because they're saying, hey, I want to wait for better conditions because of my payment, then I would strongly suggest getting together with the lender and saying, hey, let's go over what these payments look like, what my options are, and let's talk about what my disposable income actually is. I've had many conversations over the years with people that don't realize that they have at least anywhere between $1,200 to $4,700 a month that they have no idea where it's going. When we will break down, what am I spending on rent? What am I spending on my mortgage? What am I spending on my car payment? What am I spending on gas? Going out to eat, going to the movies, clothes, shoes, makeup, whatever you want to buy, we write it down, and you still have $3,000 to $4,000 a month left every month that's just going nowhere. So really, I just think sometimes people need that awakening with the numbers, looking at their net income and how they're spending it to determine that they should not compromise purchasing a home for other frivolous purchases. Whereas like the rich dad, poor dad mentality, or the word for that is doodads. You don't want to waste your money on things when you can be investing in an appreciating asset. Sometimes we need that wake up call, because one of the greatest factors in the hesitation for purchasing real estate is fear. So we have to overcome that fear. And remember, one of the intangible benefits of owning real estate is the process that you go through to accomplish that goal. Sometimes you have to pay off debt. Sometimes you got to go get paperwork that you had under some rock in storage for 10 years. You go through a lot to get to that finish line. And when you get to that finish line, the idea is that you feel a lot of pride. So sometimes we have to remind people of the sacrifices necessary on that journey when the payment is what's holding them back. If they're waiting for other factors, such as maybe their stock portfolio took a 30% decline, that's a different story, right? They just might not have the money. There's down payment assistance available for people that need a little bit more access to money, and it comes at a higher interest rate. A great example of that is we closed on a $4.5 million purchase where my client liquidated their crypto wallet to put 30% down and purchase the home based on that. Had they waited 6 months, that crypto wallet would have went from 12 million to $2 million. That's a huge shift in the net worth. So when something like that happens as drastic, I had another client who was approved to purchase in, Menlo Park area for about 6 million, and they were putting 3 million down from their stock market. They're not buying right now. They can't, because the money that they were putting down in the location that they need to be in just doesn't work. So some of those situations are very real. But when it's a fear-based thought that's based on, I can't afford it because I think that the market is going to crash, there's a lot of data that we can use to support the argument that the market is not going to crash. The market is correcting itself. It's an absolute ideal time to be able to step in, negotiate a great deal, and lower your interest rate within the next 2 years.
Marvelous. And then I would want to touch on a question that we had to clarify from the Feds raising the rates that led to increase in prices in other areas. When we said that those mortgage rates decreased from then, I mean, like if we look at the scope of things from when this happened in the past, and people are talking about mortgage rates going up and going down in the volatility. So we're saying that, from what I understand, that the year that we've had this year, 2022, that what we're seeing trending as far as these rates are going is different from what happened in a 2008 situation, or even a few years ago previously. So if we're looking at that trend, if people are looking at, what happened historically versus—
I have those numbers for you, actually. I prepared that for you.
Look at Patty. Look, this is why we love Patty. Come through with the numbers. What you got? What you got?
All right, cool. So, okay. From 1978 to 1980, the inflation rate went from 7% to 14%. As a result, mortgage rates went from 12% to 18%. The Feds raised their rates from 11% to 20% at that time. The inflation response was that it went down from 14% back down to 5%. Mortgage rates went from 18% back down to 12%. And then we went into a recession, okay? So in 1987 to 1989, inflation went from 1.75 to 5.4%. Mortgage rates went from 6.75 to 8.75%. The Fed funds rate went from 4.7 to 6.5. Inflation went down to 1.7. Mortgage rates went from 8.75 down to 5.5%. They went down 3%. Today, our inflation rate went from 2021 to 2022 from 1.5, it jumped to 8.5%. Mortgage rates went from 2.5% to almost 6%. The Fed funds rate is going from 0% to 3%. So what do you think is going to happen next? Inflation is going to drop and interest rates are going to drop. As soon as you see a report about the inflation rate improving from that 8.5% down, you're going to see rates drop. And the number one factor to the inflation figures is energy right now, food and energy. So when you see the price of gas going down, which was already reported, why the market improved this week was because they said that the cost of oil per barrel went down. I was telling everyone that in the last one. I don't remember which webinar at this point. But so when we see the inflation numbers, the second you hear a report that the inflation is down from 8.5%, which is what the Fed is doing by raising the Fed funds rate, you're going to see those interest rates drop. And then what's going to happen? Everyone who thought that real estate was going to crash is going to call you and say, shit, I should have bought when I could get that $10,000 seller credit. Why didn't I listen to you, Cece? So I'll put something together and email that to you guys, maybe to Nick and Calvin and you, and pass out to everyone or whatnot. I'll just put it together in a chart. But the trend is inflation goes up, the Fed fund rate goes up, inflation goes down, rates go back down. These are cycles. It's happened many, many times. The elements in the equation are different. What happens in real estate is different, but it's the same pattern, okay? So we can expect that interest rates will go down in the near future again. Worst case scenario, 2 years, best case scenario within 12 to 18 months. So what's gonna happen when the cost of buying and borrowing goes down? The demand is gonna go back up. Where are the houses gonna come from, guys? You have less than half of home buyers. There's not enough inventory. Where are they going to come from, guys? So the demand is going to be there and the prices will be stable. Something to just keep in mind when you're having these conversations.
So I'm hearing that if we're riding this roller coaster of demand and supply, this is
Yes.
probably a lower point of demand, lower point of competition for anyone who's still having the buyer conversation, because everybody loves a sale. And as soon as those interest rates go back down, everyone's going to be popping back up like Groundhog's Day. If I heard what I heard.
Yeah, the example I gave in my last call was that, like, okay, it's summer. So Walmart got the sale. They're like $9.99 for the outdoor blow up pool, right? $9.99. Everybody's lined up to get that pool. And they're like, shit, we got more people here than we got pools. We can't do this. So they raised the price to $25.99. All of a sudden, 3 people are buying them. They got more pools than they got buyers. So that, you know what I'm saying? They have to do that to stop the amount of people knocking on the door to buy the pools. It's the same exact concept. If you think about the fundamental laws of supply and demand, you'll understand what's going on and you'll understand why real estate can't crash.
Yes.
Can you
And then
define real quick, sorry, can you define real quick the Fed rate versus mortgage rate for everybody?
Yeah, they're the supplier, right? It's the plug, you know? So the feds are providing money to all the banks, and they are so if the banks need to borrow money, they borrow from the feds. So they are the supplier of the money, and they are not. So it's like if you had a storefront and you're buying the Doritos from the supplier for 50 cents and you're selling the bag for $1.50. That's what's going on. So the money supply, the money that gets put into circulation is provided by the Fed, and that's the price of money that's out into the system. Okay, and that's when they say they keep printing money. They keep printing money. It's driving the value of the money down. So that's what they charge people to borrow from them. And mortgage-backed securities is what changes your interest rates. So mortgage-backed securities, I'll say this again because it's actually good for me to articulate it often. So when you go out and you make a loan, the company, so the guaranteed rate, for example, or PNC or whoever. So guaranteed rate, the bank makes the loan, they package it, and then they'll sell it to a big investor like Truist or Bank of America. Then this company has like another entity, another corporate entity that they've set up, and they put the mortgages that they buy in underneath that entity, like a corporation. And then just like a Tesla or an Apple, people buy stock in those. They're basically putting bets on whether or not those people are going to pay their mortgages. And that's what creates the value for a bond, a mortgage-backed security. So then you have investors like you and I can go buy mortgage-backed securities, but the minimum spend is $10,000. You and I can go invest in mortgage-backed securities as well. It just costs a little bit more money and you go through a broker to do it. You can't buy it on Robinhood, okay? So it's just a bond that people invest in that performs. So the price of the bond market going up and down, that means the investor's confidence as to whether or not that mortgage is going to perform is what really drives the cost of the interest rates up and down. So the money supply impacts that, because when the Fed says that they're raising interest rates because that's their answer to inflation, it actually drives the mortgage rates back down. It's inflation that drives them up because people can no longer afford them. And there's a fear that that the mortgage-backed securities won't perform. Calvin, I hope that was a good answer.
No, yeah, that was a good answer. It helped me even more.
Thank you.
So
Yeah.
quick question on something I heard fluttering through this conversation that we don't hear very often. So we're talking about seller credits as an advantage. I'm hearing that being an advantage from both sides. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's an advantage on both sides because the demand is down. So if you are listing a property and you're worried about the amount of offers that you're going to be getting on that property, you would create an incentive, right? So from a seller's perspective, you have a way of attracting buyers. And then so you have to weigh out how much you want to put on the table. So if I'm putting my house on the market at 1.25 million. And I say at 1.25 million, as long as you offer at ask price, you will get a $25,000 credit towards closing costs. Now, Sally buyer who lost 50 grand in the stock market is now excited to say, oh my God, I get to save $25,000 out of pocket as long as I offer them market value and don't try to negotiate the price. This deal is far more attractive to me than the neighbor's house who's not offering me the credit. So that's the benefit to the seller. It's incentivizing bringing in more buyers. Very similar to strategies you heard back 6 to 8 months ago or 12 months ago when you say, hey, what do I do to get the seller's attention? Well, maybe you just reduce, you say something like, I'll give them back $500 of my commission or whatever the deal might be. You find a way to put more money in the seller's pocket so that the buyer would stand out. Now, in this case, the seller has to find a way to keep more money in the buyer's pocket to get more offers coming to their way because they have 75% less people writing offers. You might get a deal into contract because it only has one offer on the table. So whatever the seller can do to make their house more appealing, it's no longer that they trimmed the lawn. 8 to 12 months ago, they didn't even have to stage the house and it could have sold for top dollar, right? It was just about location. So it's on the seller's benefit, it's the incentive. The buyer's benefit is saving money, right? I would say to be careful if I was a buyer, I would be careful about how much of a credit I want because the credit essentially means that the seller is willing to net less money on that purchase transaction. So in some cases, does it make sense for me to finance that amount? If I have the money, I might just counter them and say, reduce the sales price by $10,000 instead or $15,000 instead. So I'm borrowing less money. So from the buyer's perspective, the credit either translates into less money out of pocket or financing a lower amount because they can use that as a negotiating tool to lower the sales price.
So this is, again, is this part of our conversation that's going through, the decrease of demand and that little increase of inventory. So perhaps when the demand comes back up, when the rates come back down, we might not see these opportunities when that happens. Okay.
And that could be an 18-month window. In my opinion, it's an 18-month window. According to the Fed projection, it's a 2-year window.
Okay, so that kind of ties into the question of how long we think this particular market trend is going to last.
Yeah. Yeah, and no one knows those answers, right? Anyone who says that they know those answers is lying, right? If you can call a market, we'd all be rich 5 years ago. None of us would be here still. So we wouldn't be having this conversation. I would totally be in Italy somewhere. So, and Isha, on your question about whether or not it's a buyer's market right now, I don't know if we could officially call it a buyer's market, just like we can't officially call it a recession, but we're in a recession. I would say based on the trend that I'm seeing in the contracts that I've seen across various markets, I have not seen this amount of seller credits in 7 years. So I would say that we are definitely tiptoeing into a buyer's market, but I don't know if we have the data to officially call it yet for another few months. Just like I believe we are in a recession, but we don't have the official data to call it, and we probably won't for another few months.
Okay, so we're officially not official, right?
Yeah, it's not official. Like we're talking, but like, what are we? It's the what are we stage.
All good there. Okay.
It's like, are you calling me back or not?
So let's open it up here for this last few minutes with Patty. If anyone else has any other questions that we haven't covered, granted, it's been a lot and we're happy to repeat some information because a lot of what she has had to say is repeatable, it's tweetable, we need to write it down. I'm on my third page of notes. So if there's anything anyone wants to rehash and bring back up so that we can highlight, or any other questions that we have from our group here, feel free. I know it's, if you have anything else that's popping up, that you have this world of knowledge in front of you, please don't be shy right now. Question.
Patty, I've got a question. This is Robin.
Hi, Robin.
Hi. I am mentioning the seller credit as an option to nearly every one of the calls that I connect with clients. It's being received very well. Not everybody needs it, but
Yeah.
people love the idea that I'm offering a suggestion that is, informative. And so my question to you is, since I have yet to get someone into contract doing this, is the first step to assume that the lender that they're working with is able to handle this? Because I've
Yes.
never done this. So should I reach out to the lender? And yeah.
It's a very fair question. And I would like to say that similar to this being new for you, it could be new for many people who have not been in lending for more than a decade.
Right.
So seller credits have been common over the past 2 decades that I've been in the business, up until this last run over the past 10 years. So here's your answer. For jumbo loans, which are loans in your county that in general exceed 970,000, the general rule of thumb for most investors, which are the ones who write the mortgage guidelines, is that it cannot exceed 2% of the sales price.
Okay.
In many cases, 100%, as long as the seller credit does not exceed the closing cost, the dollar amount is fine. So if the lender doesn't know this, and the lender doesn't have those numbers off the top of their head, you remember that if the credit from the seller does not exceed the dollar amount of the closing costs, which includes prepaid items such as insurance, interest, and taxes. The seller can pay all of that: insurance, interest, taxes, transfer taxes, everything. As long as the credit does not exceed that number, you're okay. On investment purchases, where you're probably going to see this negotiated more heavily, it's a 2% maximum, 2% of the sales price for investment purchases. And in some jumbo cases, it's 1.5%. So jumbo guidelines have a little bit more, have more restrictions than others. But if it's not jumbo, if it's a standard conventional loan, then you can get 100% of the closing costs covered. On an FHA transaction, which is really not common in your marketplace, but just so you guys know, you can get 6% seller credit. So, and then what that means is when it does exceed the dollar amount of the closing costs, prepaid items, insurance, taxes, HOA, everything, you can then apply that additional money to lowering the interest rate, or ask for a reduction. So if the seller has agreed to a $30,000 credit, but the closing costs are only $25,000, we're not leaving that money on the table and giving it back to the seller. We're going to do a price reduction. You've already promised me that money. So we're either going to use it to buy down the rate, or we're going to reduce the price. 100% of that is acceptable to every lender across the nation. If you ever get any pushback on that, let me know and I'll help you through the verbiage.
Okay, terrific. And, I have a lender that I have a couple clients that are working with. I've not suggested this lender. This lender is kind of how I got these clients, so I met the lender, and I don't believe has been in the business 10 years. So when I broached the subject with him the other day, he has not done these sorts of things. So like you mentioned, that's why I was kind of concerned, thinking, hey, if my clients end up taking me up on this potential opportunity, should I reach out to the listing agent first and let them know this is what we're thinking? Or I just am wondering, I don't want to say protocol, but
yeah, well, no, I think that what you can do, so let's break that down. First of all, for the lender, they're only going to need an addendum. Okay. Let's say you got into contract and now you decided that you worked on the lender credit after the fact. All you need is an addendum that states seller to credit buyer $20,000 for closing costs. That's it. It doesn't need to say anything more than that.
Okay.
Now, the other part of it is if you're doing it when you're writing the offer. When you're writing the offer, then you would either translate that into a dollar amount or a percentage. So seller, you're writing the offer just like you would. My buyer is putting, 4% down for their EMD. My buyer is putting 20% down. They're getting conventional financing, and seller is going to credit the buyer 1% of the sales price. You incorporate it into your offer. And the lender is, that loan officer, once they submit the file to underwriting, they're going to find out it's not a problem.
Okay. And then we also have the option to, because what I have mentioned to quite a few of the clients that I'm working with is that, hey, if you're looking at a whatever 6.8% interest rate, maybe we can chat with the sellers to buy down your interest rate. So that would,
If the
again,
interest rate is anywhere near that ballpark, they need to fire their lender and call me. Okay. But so no, there's not a single interest rate on earth that should be that high unless it's a non-QM or a hard money loan. So that's that. But yes, that is a great strategy. And I think that NECA is really experienced in that. So she can give you, she can give you some guidance there in terms of offer strategy and negotiations. But yes, absolutely. If we have a dollar amount and it makes a huge impact on the payment and the buyer can benefit from lowering the interest rate, yes,
Yeah.
we can apply the funds in that way.
okay.
Again, I would say that if they do not necessarily need to apply the funds in that way, then there's other ways that we can, maybe half and half. They can be creative. The lender has to really be savvy to walk the client through how to use that money. And if there's an overage, we definitely will not give it back to the seller. We're going to find another way to spend that money. I've even had some people have just a small amount of overage and a credit left, and they found a home warranty company that they could do a multi-year policy with, and they had the home warranty covered for 3 years. There's a lot of ways to spend that money. We're never giving it back to the seller. So
Sure.
if it's going in with your original offer, that's great. If it's going to be negotiated later, that's also great. 100% of the time, it's completely within lender guidelines to take a seller credit, as long as the seller credit does not exceed the closing cost. That's the key.
Okay. Great.
And when it does, remember, and when it does, we'll find a way to spend the money.
Right. And Robin, one thing that you said that was super critical is do the work ahead of time, right? Before, like on the last deal that I did this on, get all your ducks in a row before you even talk to your client that this is like you said, you preface it with your clients and they love that you're thinking this way. But before you kind of do this, call their lender, figure out, hey, their financial picture, what's possible here. And like Patty said, if they're not creative or whatever, maybe you need to call Patty or someone, that is creative about that and understand and really step out and do a little bit extra for your client. And then also call the listing agent and kind of tell them your findings before you go then to the client and say, here's kind of some options, right? Because you don't want to present something and then find out that their financial picture won't allow for it.
Right.
So I think you were right in saying, be strategic there for the client.
Well, Patty, I might have a client coming to you then because that actual 6.8% interest rate it blew me away. That was actually from a real client of mine. And she is like freaking out thinking she's got to hold off and will never be able to own a home. So I told her, hey, listen, there's some things that you're not thinking of here. And I mentioned the seller credits. She loved the idea, but she's a little freaked out. So I'd like to broach the subject with her again, and maybe I'll be referring her over to you.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for that opportunity. And if something comes up for you guys with other lenders you're working with, I will help you through it, especially if anyone gives you kickback on whether or not they can use a credit. I'd be happy to give you the verbiage that they can use. I have lenders reach out to me all the time that are losing battles with underwriters, and I just give them the guidelines they need to win. It just comes with the fact that I'm an absolute nerd. I read way too much, and I love this business. So I will help you.
Hey, Patty, there's another question in the chat.
Yeah. Which one? Are the appraisal amounts?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are the appraisal amounts decided by the lender also lowering in this market? So good question, Ishan. So appraisal lenders, in 2010, there was a new set of guidelines that was issued. HVCC is kind of what it's referred to. It's essentially a code of conduct where lenders really have no impact on what the value comes in at. They're not even allowed to discuss the value with the appraiser, neither is an agent. So if you ever piss off a realtor, they can complain. I mean, an appraiser, they can complain about you, and it's actually a big deal. So there's no one that can influence the value that an appraiser gives the property other than the market data. What determines the value of a property in terms of on paper In general, the value of anything is what someone's willing to pay for it, right? So we know that if the client is willing to pay above the appraised value, it's because they really want that property. I just closed one in Texas like that, where someone was willing to pay 80 grand above appraised value for it, even in this high interest rate environment where the value was not there. It was because it was next door to their parents' house and they wanted to live there. So that's that. So when it comes to an actual appraised value, the appraiser, it has the exact same access to the data that you do. They're looking at the same thing you are. When you pull a CMA to make an argument to your seller about what you can realistically sell their house for, that is the exact same data that an appraiser uses in a report. It's the most recent sales within a 1 mile radius of the subject property, and they'll make adjustments for various things, such as maybe it's in very good condition, or it has a pool, or there were major upgrades done to the property, or added square footage, or an added bathroom, or an ensuite, or an ADU. Various adjustments will be made based on, differences in the property. But again, it's going to be the average price of the home sales within a 1 mile radius. And then the other factor that's kind of not on paper yet is pending sales. So again, 6 to 8 months ago, one of the reasons why homes would appraise for the purchase price, even if the data had not caught up yet, is because of the pending home sales. So there were tons of properties that were pending at higher prices than what the most recent had sold for, and it kept driving the prices up. So appraisals are strictly going to be valued at what the market value is worth. And the reason why you'll see a decline is because, yes, they are going to be selling for a little bit lower in value than they were 6 to 8 months ago, because no one's willing to pay that premium. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to honor everyone's time. I know we promised we're here till 7. We love Patty. Patty loves us. We could talk about this all night. And for everyone who's on, thank you so much for joining us. And for everyone who was invited to this Zoom, if there's more information that you would like, or if you have some more questions, please reach out or leave a comment to whoever invited you to this Zoom, and we'll be happy to connect you with Patty. We'll be happy to answer the rest of your questions. And if we want to do something more specific, like a one-on-one Zoom where we can meet with yourself and the realtor that invited you, as well as our lender, we can always do a private chat with individual situations, so we can find out what is going to work for you and your process and what you need. And we have all this wealth of knowledge and this whole team to back you up. So thank you to Patty for spending the night with us here, and then thank you to everyone who joined us.
I love you guys so much. Thank you. It was great to see you, Neka, Calvin, Laura, everybody. Thank you, Cece.
Of course. Thank you, everyone. Have a good
Nicely
night. We'll
done.
see you soon.
Bye.
Thanks, Patty.